I am Dr. Katherine Mooney, and I study 19th century America and what I've started calling the cultural history of inequality. Once you recognize it as a fluid construct, and thus a construct that has shifted over time, then it loses a lot of the power it has to be coercive. We are now discovering all sorts of folks who were either intersex or trans or often were living as the opposite gender, and the historical record gives us a lot of evidence of that, right? Which is amazing and cool. So, this is a reality that has always been with us in every American war, right? We have had all sorts of records of people who, when they unfortunately were killed in combat, it was discovered that they did not have the sex characteristics they'd been assumed to have. And if you have a sort of better historical context, you can be like, oh, well, a lot has changed, but that also tells you what hasn't changed, and that makes you, I think, a more sort of acute examiner of what gender basically means and the impact it has. Seeing constant different examples of it has really reminded me that leadership can take all kinds of forms, and that it can actually be accomplished even by people who don't necessarily consciously take up that burden. So, for instance, if you look at the women of the abolitionist movement, those women are always doing that in this way that's about protecting the moral character of the country. They have adapted this vocabulary of, we are mothers and wives, and so we have a moral imperative. And it is unusual, but sometimes you get women who come out of that tradition, and so they say, yes, but because we are mothers and wives, we are also political. Okay, once we acknowledge that gender is a construct that everybody has to live in to some degree, whether they acknowledge it or not, right? Even people who live in, who are gender fluid are still having to combat the reality of sort of gender jail. And I think because those systems operate that way, the way in which people actually do end up leading when they are given the chance actually probably does reflect sort of those perceptions. It's absolutely crucial. Your experiences of various forms of categories are constantly mediated by how they come together, right? So if you don't look at intersectionality, for instance, and you use gender as just your main axis of study, and you don't acknowledge something like race, then you have fundamentally ignored the way people experience their lives. American women in particular have gained themselves access to the process by using the limitations that are placed on them, right, and turning them into virtues. And that goes back to in the American Revolutionary period where women are seeking to have a political role. And so they say, well, we should be able to have a political role because we are going to raise the next generation of American citizens. We claim political authority on the basis of motherhood. The various ways in which women have tried to sort of give themselves access have in turn shaped the acceptable ways in which women have access to power and on which power is gendered. We still are sort of constantly living with the consequences of criminal processes.